Well, good morning, everyone. Just gonna open with a few comments and then we'll begin our prayer meeting. I know that for me, to start your day in prayer and even fasting in prayer, it's amazing the peace that I feel. And when you set your day in order with God first, it's just such a blessing. And those days when I do that, I feel that closeness with the Lord, and that my priorities are straight, and I feel too that God speaks to me in those quiet moments, and it's such a blessing. And I thought I was going to just speak a little bit here on how we should pray and what we should bring before the Lord this morning. And I wanted to comment on something that I actually mentioned on Friday night too, that on Friday I was going to work and praying and asking the Lord what he would have his people hear. And I heard him speak two words to me: open hearts. And I mentioned this on a Zoom meeting on Friday, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on it today. In the book of Psalms in 51:17, it says, "The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. O God, thou wilt not despise." And I thought about that broken heart, and we hear that often in scriptures. But a broken heart kind of sounds like a sad thing. And I think sometimes it's hard to interpret that the way that the Lord intended it. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, wow, what I heard the Lord speak to me that morning was something that made more sense to me: an open heart. And I think that really what the Lord wants us to do is come before him with a heart that is open to his will. And by breaking our heart, what we're doing is we're breaking down our will and desires and submitting to his will and desires for our life. And when we first do that, when we come before the Lord with that broken heart and contrite spirit, that's when he comes into our lives. And so I think our initial state before that in life is pride, a closed heart, or an unwilling heart. And we go through that process of coming to the Lord and opening our heart now to his will. And I think, of course, part of that process is that we admit our sin and we become repentant before him. And we realize that we have a need for Christ. And I wanted to just focus today on what happens after that. Do we remain open-hearted do we keep that broken heart and contrite spirit moving forward in our lives? And I came across this verse in 2nd Nephi 4:32. It says, "May the gates of hell be shut continually before me, because that my heart is broken and my spirit is contrite. O Lord, will thou not shut the gates of thy righteousness before me, that I may walk in the path of the low valley, that I may be strict in the plain road." And what really was prevalent in my thoughts when I heard those words on Friday was that God has a lot of blessings for us if we open our hearts. And I was actually in the midst of just not feeling great that day emotionally, and kind of going into work with some dread and thinking, there's problems at work I'm going to have to face. And I really wasn't in the greatest mood because of that. And as I heard those words, I thought, I need to open my heart to the possibilities that God has for me, that I might be comforted and that I might be reminded that whatever problems I face, He can take care of. And so part of that process of opening our hearts to the Lord's will is, first, I would say, belief, opening to the idea of believing in God and in His ability to take care of our problems. And so I shouldn't feel weighed down. I should be joyful and hopeful in my belief that the Lord will take care of the things that I stand in need of. And when we open our hearts that way, I think what comes in along with that belief is healing. We begin to feel the Lord mending our hearts. And then I think we feel the forgiveness of God as we submit to His will, and we feel joy. And sometimes when we have a hard heart and we're feeling that anger or that fear or that resentment, whatever it is that's kind of keeping us closed off, it's difficult to open that gate. It takes all your strength, I think, sometimes to push that heart open and realize or just open up to the will of the Lord. And His love and Spirit come in as well. And I think that we can put our trust in God in that moment, that everything's going to work out, and put our worries aside. And in Colossians, it says, this is such an interesting verse, I think. It says, "And you that were sometime alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath He reconciled." And I think about that. When our hearts are closed, then our minds are closed too, to the voice of God and to the Spirit. And so there's this condition we can be in wickedness, where we're alienated, it says, from the Lord having a place in our minds and in our hearts. And in the next verse, it says, "In the body of His flesh through death, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in His sight, if you continue in faith, grounded and settled." It's a beautiful way to live. "And be not moved away from the hope of the gospel." And so these verses kind of tell me that we go through that same process I was describing earlier, where we start out with a mind and a heart that's closed off to the Lord, but we go through this process of belief and repentance and open our hearts and our minds so that the Lord can come in and inhabit our thoughts and our desires, and we can be, as it says here in this verse, reconciled to the Lord. And so all of this, I think, sets us up well for a prayer meeting. Because if we open our hearts to the Lord, then we can pour our hearts out before Him in prayer. And in the Psalms, it says, "Trust Him at all times, ye people, pour out your heart before Him. God is a refuge for us." And so whatever you might be facing in your life and your part of the world today, I don't know if you feel any discouragements or any concerns that might weigh you down, or anything that you might be dreading or apprehensive about today in life. But I would encourage you that you might pour your hearts out in prayer to the Lord today and see if he won't keep his promises and provide a place of refuge for you. And I would just wrap up with this thought that I think partly what the Lord wants us to do is open our hearts to the possibilities that he has for us today and to the work that he has for us to do. And I was reading in Romans this morning in the 11th chapter, which is really a parallel to Jacob 5, and that really long chapter in the Book of Mormon that talks about the tree, the olive tree. And it says there that in Romans 11, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid, rather through their salvation is come, through their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the fall of Israel and how it led to the salvation of the Gentiles. For to provoke them to jealousy. Okay, so this is kind of like the last shall be first and the first shall be last kind of message, right? And it says, now if the fall of them, speaking of Israel, be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? So let me paraphrase that. Israel fell. They turned away from God. And in so doing, the opportunity for the Gentiles to come came about. And the Lord is saying here that if their fall brought such great things, what will their rise bring? And so it's just one more thing for us to open our hearts to today. That in this time, I believe that the Lord is preparing for Israel to come back. And we have to open our hearts to the plan of God. And I know that we live in a time where the plan of God feels a little bit scary. But it's part of bringing Israel back. One of the significant outcomes of the turmoil of this time we live in is the gathering and restoration of Israel. And so I would just point out today that if we open our hearts to greater possibilities, and think back to when you came into the gospel and you opened your heart and you got baptized as a result, and the significance of that change that occurred in your life, how it opened up your life to possibilities that maybe you never dreamed of before. And if we continue to keep our hearts open, might that happen again, where we might open ourselves up to a plan that God has that's more than we could imagine. And you know, I think as you read through that 11th chapter, it's such an amazing thing. And what he's basically saying is, open your hearts to Israel, because they're coming back. And they're going to be grafted in like we were grafted to that original olive tree. And we're going to become one people. And so I think we, having received the gospel, need to open our hearts to loving the people who don't have the gospel. And so whether it be Israel or not, your neighbor who needs the church, who needs the restoration of the soul that we've received by opening our hearts, they have that need too. And so as we pray today, I think that we should be praying, in part at least, for that openness to carry out the plan of God, to see the bigger picture, and to reach out to his people. Because were it not for them, we wouldn't have these scriptures to read in the first place. And through their efforts to come to the Lord and to write down the word in the Bible and the Book of Mormon, we wouldn't have what we have. And so now it's our turn. The Lord is preparing for us to be used, that we might reach out to them with the gospel that they authored by his inspiration and carry that message back to them. And so I think that we have a great work to do today. And as I think about our part here in Denver, part of our prayer is that the Lord would send us souls and that we might open our hearts to what he might have in store for us here, whether it be Israel or someone else. The gospel's open to all who would open their hearts to the Lord. And so I think that as we do that, we can pour our hearts out before God in prayer and ask him that his work, his will would be done here, and that we would see more salvation, more growth, more fruits of the Spirit, and the joys that come along with that we might pass that beautiful heritage down to not only our perhaps our friends and family and neighbors, but our children and their children. So we have a mighty responsibility before us today. We're going to need the Lord's help to carry it out. So we'll turn it over now for some prayer and begin our prayer meeting.
Okay, those that can kneel, or if you don't, that's okay too. From not only prayers, but for testimonies. So keep up the good work. Very encouraging. And I know that the Lord is shining down upon us, and he's smiling and saying, well done, my good and faithful servants. Joyce, nice to see you. We were concerned there when we didn't see you at first, but nice to see you here again. Where do you go?
Upstairs.
Oh, we're going to set the sacrament. Okay.
Sing a song.
Well, what we're going to, Doreen has disappeared for a minute. We're going to set the sacrament table up in a minute here. Why don't we sing a song then? How about the first and last of 356, Softly and Tenderly? Oh, wait a minute. Hold it.
I knew I was walking down.
No, let's change that. Whatever. Blessed Assurance is what that 346 or something.
Blessed Assurance.
346, yeah. 346. We'll do all three Blessed Assurance while she sets the table. We said something wrong.
All the day long, with assurance, all the day long,
My Savior, all the day long. Mission, perfect divine, rapture, burst on my side. Angels descending from above, heaven's thirsty whispers of love. My soul, my Lord, my Savior, all the day long. This is my this is my praising my Savior all the day. Have rest.
If I'm not mistaken, we almost sound like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Just a few more voices. Hope you've all had a good week. We've had a relatively good week. We'll talk about that later. I want to talk about trumpets. Trumpets. You know, when they play this song Taps, you know, it's such an eerie sound. You know, years ago when we Carrie and I lived in Washington, D.C., we had the opportunity to visit the Arlington National Cemetery. I would say one of the spookiest places we've ever been in my life was that cemetery in November at 6:00 at night when Taps play. I mean, it just makes chills go up and down your spine. But I never really realized that, you know, there are words to that Taps song. I don't know if you ever heard it. You know, we only hear the bugle or the trumpeter playing the notes, but we're going to get into that in a bit. But throughout that song, with the trumpets blowing or the bugles blowing around, there's a verse in there that repeats itself several times that God is nigh. And it's what I'll talk about today. God being near to us, wherever we're at, whatever the circumstances is. We talk many, many times. I know I do so many times about the distractions in life that remove us from the presence of the Lord's Spirit in our life, whether it be afflictions or whether it be challenges on jobs or schools or relationships or finances or whatever it might be. You know, Satan knows how to throw things in our mix in our life to make us feel that God's way away from us. And I think one of the significance of that Tap song is that, you know what, with the silence that it brings, you know, and I don't think anybody can listen to that song without reflections within themselves of peace. But when you hear those words later on too, maybe as you hear that song in the future, you'll realize how that brings God right back to your heart. And without God being right back in our hearts, we're going to be lost and forlorn in our lives. We've been there. We've drifted. We've been like the prodigal son. We've taken off on our own and kind of packed up our package of goodies, you know, that God's blessed us with and decided, you know, I don't need anything now. I'm going to be on my own. And we find that God is not near us. And we find that we fail miserably many times. And we come, fortunately, crawling back to him, just like the parable was here, that our Father takes us back for another shot at it. if you will. I mean, he has so much patience for us that I don't know. It's awesome. But the Old Testament, we've been blessed here with Sister Lynette's lessons on the feasts and festivals of the Old Testament. And throughout those feasts and festivals, trumpets were involved in all that stuff. And you know what that trumpet meant? That meant that there was a covenant with those people and the Lord. When they blew those trumpets, God was saying, I'm near. When you hear that trumpet blow, know that I'm not far from you, and whatever your need is or whatever cause you have now, you hear that trumpet, you look for me. I'm there. And we saw that throughout the Old Testament. God's covenants with Israel came through that trumpet. Now, we don't hear the trumpets as loud as we do anymore in our lives, but we have to condition ourselves to be able to listen through the noise, like we talked about, was that last week about, being still and listening for the ticking, right? We can find the Lord if we're quiet and we listen for where he's at in our life. We may not have the trumpets blowing, but we know we have the spirit of that trumpet in our heart. And, in Numbers here, 9th and 10th chapter of 10th Numbers, it says, and this is the covenant that the Lord had with the people of Israel with those trumpets, he says. If you go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresses you, then you shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and you shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies. It goes on to say, also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, you shall blow with trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. Now we have to kind of visualize or conceptualize that trumpet blowing. But you know what? It's not very convenient for us to carry around our trumpet. I mean, literally. We're not going to be carrying our trumpet with our purses or our wallets or whatever we're going to have and stop and blow the horn when we need it. But we have every opportunity of a type and shadow of a trumpet in what we just did. Got on our knees to pray to the Lord. That's our trumpet. Our trumpet's to be able to stop where we're at, kind of regroup when we find ourselves drifting from the Lord, and to bring him near to us, we need to offer that prayer. We need to have that remembrance that the Lord is alive in our life. And he tells us here to the Old Testament people, that blow your trumpets, offer that peace offering, that they may be to you a memorial before your God, for I am the Lord your God. He brings himself to you in that regard. So, we have that opportunity to seek God's help anytime. We just got to remember to use it. We just got to remember that he's near to us wherever we may be. It's interesting to say that in Peter, 3rd chapter, 1 Peter, it says here, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers, he says. We just need to call upon him. The significance of that trumpet in the Old Testament days, the significance of our prayers, of just our plea to him, just the attitude of remembering him is important to the Lord. And it's even more important to us to know that he's near to us, no matter where we are, no matter what the circumstances are. He will find that house for you. It is totally frustrating, totally disappointing, totally discouraging. But God is near you, Doreen. And he's going to bless you with something that you never even thought of at some point in time. I'm still struggling with this thing here. I had a good week. The doctor helped me with my shot, but now there's something else going on here that might not be involved with the nerve that's causing some issues. So, waiting 2.5 months for that relief that I had this week was a blessing, but I'm not out of the woods yet. I need to have God near me for a little lot longer yet to say, you know what, give me the strength and the endurance and the patience to kind of get through the next phase of what goes on here. This dude back here's got school. He's going to coach baseball now and all that kind of stuff. New responsibilities coming on with him and leadership of young people. He needs God near him. in all that he does. And I'm not saying that he has to preach to those kids on the baseball field, but he's got to know in his case that God's near to him as the Lord puts him in those roles to influence and be a leader to other people. We all have things in our life. Your job. I mean, God bless you. I couldn't go to work anymore. I don't have the patience for that. And like you said, you had some things this week that, were concerning. That happens, But more than anybody, and I know that the Lord is near you in all things, and he gets you through it all. Stephanie, your gym thing and your 2 baby things, and goodness, I don't know how you do it, and you still look so good, But I know that's because the Lord is near you, and he's not going to forsake you in anything. And yeah, you have some of these bundles in your way, but he's brought you through it through your own testimony. Carry your situation. You've been a mess for 2 years ago, right? Day after day after day. But the Lord's taking you through tumors and taking you through other things. The Lord was near you and me through that whole thing. He's with us all the time. The Lord is with us. And, he stands as a symbol of strength and comfort for us. Usually when they play that song Taps, it's at the end of the day, when the day is kind of going away and it's getting dark and dismal and whatnot. And the other opportunity that they play that thing is at somebody's funeral, usually a veteran's. And you're sending off that veteran, and doesn't show the end, shows the hope that God's near. I think that we need to kind of be assured of God's presence in our life, that blessed assurance. Jesus is mine, Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. As we hear those taps play, as you hear those words being played before you, just remember that it's representative of the fact that God never leaves us, that we leave God. And that if in fact, a remembrance of that tune, a remembrance of that trumpet being blown or that bugle being blown is evidence of the fact that, God is near me, no matter what the circumstances are, and I can get through anything because I know God is near me. That's all I got to say about this. I mean, it wasn't long, but it hopefully was focused enough that it put something in your mind and heart that maybe the next time you hear taps, it's not just the end of the day or for a funeral for somebody who's leaving, but it's an encouraging call that God is near every one of us all the time. So you want to kind of roll that one? You and
Yeah. Share the screen here.
Praise God, on the sun, from the lake, from the hills, from the sky, all is well, safely rest. All is love. Thanks and praise, before sun, before stars, before sky, as we go this we know. God is shine bright. fear. Do not fear. Friend, good night. Dear friend, good